Welcome. Thanks for joining in with us. Today, we're going to give you some pointers on finding out what you are best at doing and what to do with those qualities once they're discovered. Today, we call that your superpower, and the term has changed over the years, but you know what I mean. So let me ask you, do you know what your best qualities are? Are you certain of what you're best suited to do? Are you sure? Now, is this just what you're doing in business just to make money, or do you really know, hey, I'm really good at this and that's what you're focusing on? And it's fine if you know the answer or don't know the answer, because I want to ask, what if you explored your superpower and you put that to use at your company? Wouldn't that make things a lot more fun? Anything besides just making money, I think, is more fun. While making money can be fun for a lot, we want a little bit more to it. So if we're really good at something and we explore that and we add that pizzazz, let's call it, I think it makes things a little bit better. Well, we're going to teach you about exploring your superpowers with Jason Miller. Get ready to look at your abilities like you never looked at them before. And while we're at this is all about helping you and your friends turn your vision into reality. We want to help you get very successful at growing your business to a high level. In fact, we're going to help turn you into an elite entrepreneur. Meet Jason Miller. He's a seasoned CEO with overwhelming passion to help other business owners and CEOs succeed. And you can call him Jason the Bull because he takes no BS and no excuses from the people he serves. He's mentored thousands of people over 2 decades. And if I'm counting right, he's an active principal and chairman for 11 companies simultaneously right now. And I'm sure he's going to correct me on the count. It keeps growing. I think that says enough. Let's get into it and learn. Hi, Jason. Welcome to the Tony DUrso Show.
Hey, Tony. It's great to be here, brother. It's an honor and a privilege to be on the show and to really be able to share and help your audience. So thanks for having me.
The honor is mine. And I've been waiting for this interview because I want to learn how to develop my best qualities in order to serve others. Because I think when we serve others, I really think that it's like we're extending ourselves. We're being, to quote an old phrase, we're being the best that we can be when we go and actually help others, as well as perhaps just instead of just helping ourselves. I see it as a difference. And what I like to do perhaps is start from the beginning, Jason, with your backstory. How did it all start for you?
Yeah, well, it's a long story, so I'll keep it as caged as possible here. But I'm a farm kid. I'm a Montana farm boy. I grew up on a farm in Montana. Grew up, I don't ever like to say I grew up in life struggling or anything like that, because that's all relative, right? So I grew up, we had things that we needed and so on and so forth, and didn't know any better. So I always say my parents provided. I felt like a millionaire as a kid, right? Because no matter what, we had clothes, we had food, we had a home, and man, that's all that really mattered. We were a small farm, and my parents didn't make much money at all, but we always felt like we were rich as kids, and but that's the way I grew up, and they raised us to feel that way. And my family's got a huge long line of military tradition. So I joined the military at 17, spent 23 years in the military and retired from the military. My parents were both entrepreneurial, and my mom owned 4 or 5 businesses in town. My dad owned the farm. So that bug was just eating at me my first, 4 or 5 years in the military. And I thought, man, I got to pursue that. It's like a hole in my soul that I'm not pursuing. And, it may seem trivial, but starting way back then was like not drop shipping, but I was getting product from overseas and selling it online and so on and so forth. And we grew that to a wonderful little business. And then the military it was tough to balance that kind of business. So I thought, well, maybe I should get into real estate, but I didn't want to get into real estate because I love business. So I thought, okay, well, I wonder if I can buy businesses and flip them like a real estate agent, right? So that's what I did. I started buying distressed companies and off of a website, maybe it still exists today, called flippa.com. You could buy internet-based type businesses and then raise them up a little bit, turn them and burn them, and I did that just a bunch of times. It was like being a real estate agent only for businesses. And, I did that and I found some gems in there and I hung on to those gems and some of them are still part of my companies today. 13, by the way.
I knew there were more than 11.
And so, I went through the military career part, so on and so forth. And then I was going to retire and I thought, man, you know what? I've got all this institutional knowledge and these superpowers that I have. And what am I going to do with them? Right. And I thought, well, I could just open another consulting firm and just be another consulting firm. But I thought, how could I do that so much differently? And that's when the strategic advisor board model was born. And I thought, I believe you can't have any more than about 3 or 4 superpowers. So I thought, what if I find 9 other people that have all the superpowers that are opposite of mine and that are CEOs? And that's exactly what I did. And I created a model like no other, and that is the strategic advisor board, where we can go into a company and pretty much tell the CEO, hey, go on vacation. We'll see you in a year. We'll fix all your stuff for you. We don't do that, but I'm just saying for the dramatic effect of it. And that's what we've been doing for the last 6 years. I'm the current sitting CEO of that company. And the others, I just run senior chair. And I love business. I loved my military career. Some people say, well, why didn't you do 30? Well, it got to the point where, it didn't really make sense. I mean, you're taking orders from people that are, it's nothing to do with being below you, but at some point you grow past that, right? And it was just like, it's just time for me to go and, move on to the next chapter of my life. And that's what I did. And we've been rocking it for the last 6 years, helping companies. We took over 100 companies through COVID successfully and helped them find their superpowers to be able to do those little micro movements and micro pivots and make themselves better. So that's the compressed story, Tony.
That's quite a story. And I really like how that vision evolved. And I understand that there's money involved and money's good and we need it to eat and all that. But I like to go beyond money. Why do you do it, Jason? What's your purpose behind this?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, for me, I'm not in that place in my life where like money's, a need, because I've built generational wealth already. So, and even before that, before I didn't have that, it was always about, put the people first and, do a lot of good and leave a footprint. And after that, everything just seems to kind of fall in place. And I know people are like, oh yeah, sure it is. That's easy to say. Right. And that didn't just come naturally, right? I mean, it comes over some time, obviously, and you have to build towards that. But the point is if you can get yourself out of the chase, stop chasing it. Because I see so many business owners that we work with, and I'm not talking like, solopreneurs. I'm talking about companies that are already doing $50-60 million a year. And they're still chasing that money, constantly in that money chase. And that's where, you start caging all that back a bit and you just notice this natural growth happen because you're putting the people first versus putting the money versus putting, man, I got to, really track my P&L and do all these things and do all this stuff and look at all my indicators and all these different things. it's important to do those things, right? But you also got to remember at the end of the day, it's people. It's all about people. It's about community. It's about building all of that community essence out. Because once you build a community, you no longer chase money. You don't need to chase money because the community will support you. And that's why I spend so much time on community building. I mean, just one of my communities is over 300 CEOs. And I don't know, it's probably one of the biggest support groups in the world. Just because, not in number, but in willingness, right? Is everybody is so willing to share and help each other through problems, through this and that. Great example. I'll give this great example. You know, Philip, remember Philip from our show? He came down with cancer.
Oh.
And you know, his situation is difficult, and he's very much a solopreneur, and he doesn't really have very good insurance and all that stuff. And I went to our community and I said, hey guys, this is one of ours. This is one of our people. Let's help him through this. And we raised $15,000 in less than 24 hours to pay for his surgery.
Absolutely amazing.
That, my friend, is where it's at right there. And that's being able to build a community that's very supportive like that. And everything else will just fall in place. That's the key takeaway. Don't chase money. Let it fall in place very naturally, because it will, for sure. I'm living proof of that.
There's a lot that we need to learn from that, and I'm going to go into that in just a little bit. We're talking about exploring your superpowers with Jason Miller, and you can find him at strategicadvisorboard.com. That's 3 words, strategicadvisorboard.com. Jason, let's get a little further into your vision path and your community building. That's absolutely astounding what you did. Hats off to you. And I wish Philip a good surgery and good recovery. And yes, I met him last year on one of your shows. So I hope that all works out very well. And now on the superpower thing here, we listening here, we're entrepreneurs, we're business owners. I want to start with some of your superpowers. You talked about it, and how did you discover that you had a superpower, that this was something to just really take up to another notch, another level? And what did you do once you found out?
Yeah. Well, you know, all my military time in the career and in my career in the military, there's a lot of lessons that can come from the military, especially operationally speaking, right? Because people say, well, why do you follow that model? And my answer is really simple. Been doing it for a couple hundred years and it seems to be working out all right. So follow things that are proven, right? And then I took those operational skills, because every business at its core is operational, right? So I took those same operational skills and I started applying those to business. And I found that, you know, good project management, good ability to hyper grow and hyper scale, be able to create these little micro pivots, these little things like that. They're all direct reflections of a lot of the things that I took away militarily from how the military operates. And I just took that and I plugged that into the civilian business model and went, wow, no wonder that's so inefficient, right? And it's not that the government's efficient. I'm not saying that, but the processes behind a lot of that at lower levels are very, very efficient because they have to be, because there's lives on the line, right? So it creates a whole different dynamic operationally. Now, taking that operational experience and then plugging that into what is a typical business model, you can very quickly delineate where all of those specific choke points are in that business off of a simple process, 9-step process that we take every client through. And it's amazing, actually, Tony, that most business owners don't even know they have choke points until we take them through this process. And it's like, the light bulbs just start going off like crazy. So, the superpower part of it, identifying that superpowers, everybody has them, right? Everybody. A 3-year-old has superpowers, right? So everybody has superpowers. The key is don't try to be an expert at everything, and make sure you surround yourself with the right people that have the superpowers that you don't have.
So far, one of the big takeaways is just focus on 3 or 4 very key items that you're good at. You may not have said it that way, but the way I kind of look at it is something that you're passionate about, that you really enjoy doing, that seems to come with not a whole lot of effort. That may be a good way to define what we consider a superpower. You can add more to it. And I'm looking through your list of what to talk about and what you're good at, and there's just 3 points, which is really interesting because some of us have a lot to say, but these 3 things are really packed. You just talked a little bit about it, and one of those points, just to say it from the superpower side, it's you're able to deal with hyper growth and hyper scale. And if there's something more you'd like to say on that to kind of put that all together, because that's really quite the superpower. I think everyone listening to this wants that one. So tell us more.
Yeah, for sure. Well, you think about it, and a lot of people classify money versus people inside of a company completely incorrectly, right? So people think money and people, growth and scale are the same thing. And it's actually they're very two quite different things when it comes to growth being people, procedures, operationally, all those things. That's the growth side of the company. That's the people side. The scale side's the money side, right? And that's the money that comes into the company, money that goes out, so on and so forth. And one of the biggest challenges I see with a lot of companies is balancing those 2 things, balancing growth in people and balancing the scale in the money, right? So there's typically this offset balance of how every company runs. They've either knocked it out of the park for 6 months and then they hired a bunch of employees, and now all of a sudden they're going down in a spiral. They have 60 employees. Now they got to lay people off, right? So balancing that money side and the people side is key. And you do that by running super lean. You got to run lean. You don't hire one person to do one job that takes 2 hours a day, right? Why? Because now people are counting on you to feed their family, right? So you have to balance that out to where no matter where you are on that scale side during the year, because business ebbs and flows, right? All the time. It's never just, hockey stick, that's Harvard talk, right? So it goes like this throughout the year, up and down, up and down, up and down. And the key is to delicately balance your staffing so it rides with those up and downs. That way you don't have to let people go, hire people, let people go, hire people, let people go. I just see it all the time. So you have to focus on balancing those 2 things out. And that's the answer, not to just give you here's a problem. The answer to that is leaning out all your operational processes down to as lean as they can possibly be. And then you're assigning tasks and functions to people that you're using them in their ultimate capability and their ultimate superpower. And you're not overlapping responsibilities within teams, because most of the time, most companies are 20% overstaffed, at least, even up to 30% overstaffed, right? It's kind of like, gosh, what was that show with Melton? They've moved him around. He's finally ended up in the basement, and he wasn't even on payroll for 2 years. Office Space.
Office Space, my most favorite of all. Love that movie.
Right? And here he hadn't even been on payroll for 2 years, right? So it's like, you know, those are the things you have to get through, those operational efficiencies. And most of the time, as the CEO, you are not that person to do that. You need to either bring somebody in to help you through that, to do that, because you're too close to it, way too close to it. We all are that way. And, you know, so being able to functionally make sure your teams are cross-functional, all these different things, to be able to run the company as lean as possible, you'll get this matched up growth and scale. And that's what makes it hyper, right? Because they match and they run with your business's ebbs and flows. And that allows you then to scale this side with this side.
I like that very much. It makes a lot of sense the more I think about it. And just as an aside to the audience, we're going through one of the worst storms that we've had this year. It seems like the roof is going to come off and the windows are rattling like crazy. So excuse me, I've tried to keep it as a quiet environment, but I'm sure that you're probably wondering, what's all that sound? Well, it's just a big storm, but we're going to stay here. The power's on. We're going to keep going. The next point that is one of your superpowers, and it really shows, is, and you talked a little bit about this as well, but I want to focus on this now, is strategic and operational implementation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Very key. And that even in itself right there is, you know, when I talk about strategic implementation, strategic implementation is, it's more than just, I got an idea, go, right? It's, I got an idea. How do I get that idea from idea to full implementation, but then not implementation, but to success, right? You know, we all have a lot of good ideas. That doesn't mean they all need to end up on the table. Some of them need to be taken out back behind the barn and shot. So I'm a huge fan when I say operational implementation is we have a plan. We put an operational function together for that plan. And then we take it to market, see if the market wants it. And then if they don't want it, we don't launch it. It's a time thing, right? When it comes to this stuff. I think everybody would be familiar with the term pre-launch, right? So, and a great example of this is courseware creation, right? A lot of people that go out and create courses, they'll go out and create this course. They'll spend 8 weeks, 9 weeks creating a course, try to launch it, and then it just goes down the can, right? It does nothing. Now you've spent 9 weeks to create something nobody wanted. So instead, operationally, right, create an outline, create some of it, a small part of it, pre-launch it, pre-sell it. And then once you see that the market wants it, create the rest, sell, scale, right? So now maybe you only got 2 weeks tied into it versus 9 or 10 weeks. So I'm a big believer operationally in the just-in-time methodology. It's my own method. do things just in time. So I hope that answered the question.
It does. I like that. Very fascinating. And again, I'm going to ponder more about that. I am actually looking at putting a class together. It takes its time. It takes its strategy. Things change. There's so much behind it, and you want it to be just right. But that's another topic, another time. The last superpower I want to bring up, because you only have 3.
That's it.
But you're running 13 companies, so it says something there. Micro pivots.
Yes, micro pivots. So everybody probably got used to, 2021, 2022, the word pivot, right? The word was overused quite a bit, which is ironic because I got a magazine called Pivot, but but here's the lesson I really learned and why the terminology micro pivot came about. A lot of the companies through the pandemic, what I learned was with a lot of those companies, by the time they got to me, we couldn't do strategies that were just big pivot strategies, right? They didn't have the capital to do it. They were already 6 or 8 months, probably past closing their doors, right? They should have, but they stayed alive somehow. And so we had to figure out a way. How can we still help companies through the growth and scale process, but do it in a way that we create a big, like an overarching strategy, a bridging strategy that then had all these little micro movements in between that created revenue that could be rolled back in to then create the next small scale and the next 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 to get to the big scale, right? So, instead of throwing quarters in the pond, we were just throwing pennies in the pond at first. So you threw 10 pennies in, 10 pennies created $1, right? So then we could take that 90 cents, scale, and then turn, burn with micro strategies, right? So therefore the term micro pivot was born because that's what we're doing. We're doing these little tiny micro pivots that led to the big overarching pivot strategy that may have taken 4 to 5 months. An example of that, just so you have an example. You might remember through the pandemic in New York, there was a small restaurant that was trying to figure out how to keep their doors open. And there was a promotion that was put out. Well, hey, if you do take out from us, we'll include a margarita for free and a roll of toilet paper. Right? So that was during the whole toilet paper shortage thing. And that was a micro pivot, right? So we made this little tiny micro pivot, and that grew their orders by substantial, actually. And people like, we can't get toilet paper. Let's order takeout. And that grew their income. So then we could roll that back in, that revenue, that extra revenue back in to the next small micro pivot and the next and the next. And that's how we got a lot of these companies through it. They didn't get rich during it, but the point is we all knew it was going to end someday, right? So it was like, how do we micro pivot these companies to continue growth and scale and get them through that without disabling them by saying, well, you're a restaurant, we're going to turn you into a COVID testing site, right? Something like that. See, that's a massive pivot. When you think of pivot, you think, woo, that's like totally different, right? So they still got to do what they love to do. We just did it incrementally to keep their doors open.
Brilliant idea, brilliant strategy, something to really think about. And as I listen to this interview and we go through it, I'm thinking, how do we really discover what our true superpower is? We talked a little bit about it. I've made some comments on it as well. Is there anything else that you can say that really is like, oh yeah, no, that's the one you got to focus on. This is how you do it. Any other tip or help on that?
Sometimes it's not about what you love, right? And that's one thing you got to keep in mind is it's not always about, well, I love to wake up every day and do this, right? Because just because you love to wake up every day and you like to whittle on a stick and make something, that doesn't make it a superpower, right? That's just something that you like to do. I think of superpowers as it's something that, you've identified inside that you do love to do, but you're extremely good at it, right? And that's why I say you can only have a few. Because if you say you have like 10 things you have a superpower at, that's not even possible, right? Not really. I mean, I'm good at a lot of stuff. I was a sniper in the Army. I'm a good shooter. I wouldn't say it's a superpower, but I was really good at it, and I did it for a lot of my career. But I wouldn't call it a superpower. The things I can have the most control around, and the things that I can take somewhere and share that with somebody else to really be able to take them to a different place. To me, that's what matters, right? So I look at David Carter and Reggie Walker, two prior NFL players. They're clients of ours. They have a great company. It's called The Game Within the Game, and they help young athletes through that experience of high school into college and then potentially into professional sports. And great clients of mine, and they have their experience and their superpowers comes from that sports experience, right? But what the experience they didn't have was the business side of that experience, right? So now I come in and couple those two together. It can't fail. Right? There is no failure in that, right? So know what your superpowers are. In their case, their superpowers were helping young people and so on and so forth, not so much on the business side. That's when you lock your hands with somebody that has all the superpowers that you don't have. That's where the magic begins, my friend, right there.
Adding superpowers on top of superpowers makes
That's right.
really good business. It makes a lot of more fun.
That's it.
Sounds great. Jason, as I'm thinking through this, I'm thinking how you've developed and grown your business and businesses and added businesses. And I'm wondering, how did you use your superpowers? For example, you talked a little bit about the challenge of the past couple of years, but how about the biggest failure? What was your biggest failure and how did you deal with that using what you're really good at?
Yeah. It's an easy one, and it's a bit emotionally charged, actually. So one of my companies, I was the senior chair on the company, and I got a call. It was in the morning. I got a call that my CEO, and not just a CEO, she was a great friend of mine for 10 plus years, and abruptly, no warning, no nothing, anything, had a brain aneurysm and died just like that.
Oh my goodness.
And I mean, that thrust me into just, I like to say, I've been shot at, I've had rockets over my head, all those things, and in the military and combat. And I felt that same feeling. It felt like a round hit me square in the chest and the plate and just knocked me down. Right. And the general manager came to me and she's like, I don't know what to do. And so it thrust me to take the CEO role of that company, to only find out exactly how much trouble it was in, right? It was in a lot of trouble, and I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to pull it out. And I did what I tell people to do. I went to my mentors and I said, I need some help here, right? And one of my mentors, he was a prior CEO of a Fortune 50 company and a Fortune 100 company. And he's my next door neighbor. And, I love the guy to death. And yeah, I leave a lot of checks on his counter. And he was a big advocate. My team, my community, all of those people came together and rallied around me to, help me through that situation. And, there's a picture I actually posted. It's funny. This question came up because I posted on LinkedIn yesterday, and there's a picture of me with a pen and a piece of paper up against my head like this as I'm talking to that general manager on my fireplace, the hearth of the fireplace. And after I hung up, I got up and I had two choices. I can walk away, which wasn't an option because I had employees to support there. Most of the clients from that were in that company were actually clients from my other companies. So I couldn't let them down, right? And, it's one of those moments that define who you are. You throw your rucksack on your back with all your tools and you go to work. Your backpack full of tools and you go to work. And that company today is one of my most thriving companies that I have today. And that general manager is now the CEO. So
Great case in point. Good job on taking care of that. Once again, we talked about exploring your superpowers with Jason Miller, and you can find him at strategicadvisorboard.com. Jason, great stories. I'm going to listen to this again and soak it up. And actually, I'm going to list down what I believe are my superpowers. I've never actually listed them down. And I'm just going to list down 3 instead of 25.
There you go.
Little joke there. Jason, I just want to thank you so much. You've talked about some very startling points. I think we all need to take a look, take a think. I know I said it a little strange. Take a think, maybe a little micro pivot, and make sure that we're really set well for this new year. Jason, thank you so much. I really did appreciate it.
Oh, Tony, man, it's great to see you again, brother. From our last time we got to talk, and it's always a pleasure to have a great conversation with you. So thanks for having me on the show.
Hey, thanks for hanging out with me while I featured an elite entrepreneur who took his vision to reality in a big way. We discussed exploring your superpowers with Jason Miller. We talked about his superpowers. How did he discover them? And more importantly, what did he do once he found out? And again, just to remember and refresh you, just 3 or so is all you really need to focus on, not 25. We talked about hyper growth, hyper scale. That's one of his superpowers. Strategic and operational implementation, micro pivots. We talked about how do we really discover what our superpower is. I talked about, well, let's do something that we really love, that we're passionate about. Well, that may be in there. That's part of it. But Jason really gives a very definitive answer to what is our superpower. It's not that, hey, I like to wake up in the morning and drink coffee. I wonder if we could really make a superpower out of that and get paid for it. It's a possibility, but I'm being a little tongue-in-cheek there, a little joke here. And the thing is, it's something that we feel we can excel at and do very, very well at. And there's just a few, and we will need and get the help of others who have their own superpowers that can help us, and then together we can build a good organization. I'm going to let you listen to listen to it again, and really soak that up, and tell me, what did we discuss that resonated with you? All right, let's use this, and let's help you move on your journey to success. Thanks, and remember, just take action. Success awaits those who persevere and remain steadfast despite the odds. Sow good seeds. Do good deeds. And join me on the next episode of The Tony DUrso Show.